Welcome to your Sunday morning message. It's still Saturday night for me. I've got a lot going on. There's a lot of people in the house right now. That's why you're outside with me out in the carport next to Paul Aaron's truck. And we're getting ready for CMC for the service tomorrow morning. Now, I still wanted to go ahead. Number one, I apologize for missing last Sunday. Lots going on. More than anything, just simply exhausted from all of my traveling, and the year seems to only be getting busier. Nevertheless, what I want to talk about while I have your attention this time is identity starvation, identity suicide, and identity sophistication. If you know anything about my story, you know that I originally intended on simply distancing myself from my old Christian minister persona. My hope was that over time people would associate me with something different. But since you are keeping up with the story, you know that was not what was allowed to happen. Instead, I was outed, and so I moved into damage control, and I did what I now refer to as I committed identity suicide. I stepped forward into the public limelight, and I confessed my non-belief and received all of the repercussions from doing so. The key word for that is not distance, because that was identity starvation. The key word for identity suicide is defiance. In spite of all of the external pressures and in spite of my internal fears and reservations, I was defiant, and I still stepped forward and declared my non-belief, just like many of you have. What's next for us? What's next for us is identity sophistication. We no longer belong to religion. So we're no longer obligated to one set of vocabulary. We're not obligated to one set of traditions. Now that we're non-believers, we're not in some new religion of non-belief. We're able to still be growing and expressing ourselves even in ways that are somewhat different than other non-believers within our network. I consider that to be identity sophistication, pushing the envelope a little bit further, expressing ourselves more clearly, and above all, leaving room to grow as individuals. You've heard me tell the story. One of the very first times that I was having lunch with a group of non-believers, a little old lady came over from the group and asked me, could she get my cup refilled with sweet tea? I said, of course. She waddled off. She got it refilled. She waddled back. I was in mid-sentence, but I stopped in order to thank her and to be polite. And I said to her, "You're an angel." If you've heard this, you can quote it with me. At which point she said, "There's no such thing as angels." Obviously, she was right. Obviously, I knew that and agreed with her. It was just Southernese. It was something that I was accustomed to saying. How many of you right now feel intimidated and afraid that within your new social group of non-believers, you're going to say something like that and get called on it? Here's what I say to you. It's time for identity sophistication. That's just part of the Southern vernacular. It may just be part of who you are and how you express yourself comfortably. That's a very shallow example and meaningless example. I'm sure you can come up with something that's much, much more relevant. The point is, we no longer belong to any religion. We're no longer obligated by any peer group to speak a certain way, to think a certain way, or to act a certain way. You know my philosophy. I think that our only code should be to love our neighbors as ourselves, but to make sure we love ourselves first. So with that being said, maybe you're in the process of committing identity starvation. You're just trying to put distance between you and everyone else's concept of you. Or maybe, in defiance, you've committed identity suicide. And I give you kudos for doing that. But maybe you've already done that and you're asking yourself, what's next? I think what is next is identity sophistication. Being sophisticated, recognizing and acknowledging that the world is complicated, that language is complicated, that society is complicated, that cultures are complicated, and that we are not to live yet another life of obligation. Are you free from religion, or have you just changed religions? Starvation, suicide, or sophistication? Be brave, my friend. Thank you very much for supporting us through Patreon. It's making a world of difference, and it's enabling us to be sophisticated in this very, very complicated and churchy culture in the Deep South. Thank you. And some of you, I'll see you Wednesday on Patreon. Others, I'll see you next Sunday.